I'm glad to have William and Karen with us today. I'm going to turn the service over to the Boardmans. You pray for them, listen to them. I'm sure God has great things for the Boardman.
Well, good morning. What a privilege to be in Muncie this morning. As Pastor Scott said, we actually are members here, and we've wanted to be here so many times, but Pastor Scott just never invited me, so we finally came. It is a privilege to be here and see God's people. Brother Scott, you have a precious congregation. A lot of good people, and nice to see some familiar faces that we've known across the years. I think I may have known Nathaniel since he was like maybe that big. And he's not that big anymore, but nice to see our friends again that we met at Pilgrim Nazarene Camp last year too. Thanks for being here. So this morning, I'm just going to ramble a little bit, and then I'm going to turn it over to Heidi, and she's going to say a few words. She's a much better speaker and much better looking than me, so you'll enjoy that better. And then we're going to show you a little slideshow if we can make it work. I think Anthony's got it under control. And then I'm going to share a few words with you again. So it was our privilege in early March to go back to the country of Honduras. And I believe this was my 10th year to go down there in a medical mission endeavor. And of course, perhaps some of you are familiar with the country of Honduras. It's in Central America. Total residents in Honduras is about 8 million, maybe approaching 9 million. Extremely beautiful country, extremely beautiful people, but extremely impoverished people. The second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, only behind Haiti. And if you see in the news, caravans of people go from Honduras up to our southern border. So, great people, a great opportunity to spread God's word to those very beautiful but very needy people. So about 10, 12 years ago, Dr. Don Smith contacted me and said, hey, we're starting this medical mission thing. You're a doctor. Would you be willing to go with us? And I said, hey, sounds kind of like fun. And so Don Smith was affiliated with an organization called Evangelistic Faith Missions that some of you perhaps are familiar with. Missions organizations headquartered in Bedford, Indiana, where I live. But they've been around, I don't know, pushing 100 years maybe, I don't know, something like that. That works all around the world. But Honduras is one of their works that we participate in. So we go down there every year and do a medical brigade, they call it, and American doctors, nurses, translators, whoever, go down there and participate. And it's a great opportunity, as I said, to spread the gospel. My missionary buddy, Daniel Melton, is kind of the main guy there. And if you've ever been to IHC, you've probably seen Daniel Melton around. Daniel has a booth representing his work, and he also sells coffee. So the lady that needed coffee, go to IHC, you'll get some pure, fresh Honduran coffee. There's nothing better. Literally, so we're at the tail end of coffee season down there right now, but literally we had coffee that had just been picked and just had been dried and just had been ground. And you get that fresh coffee with pure cane sugar that they grow down there. There's nothing better than that in the morning. That'll wake you up. Daniel Melton is an incredible missionary. One of God's most sacrificial people, only behind Pastor Scott. He truly loves the Lord and has dedicated his life to the work of missions. And he's a great guy. So at this time, I'm going to have Heidi come and share a few things with you.
I don't know how qualified I really am to share this morning. I feel like I'm a little late to the Honduras party because I've only been 2 times and Dave's been about 10 or 11 times. But I was privileged to go last year, and it was my first time, and I'd always just heard the stories. And to go and actually experience it was very special. But I just jotted down a few things after my trip last year and then this year too. Just some little lessons that I learned, and I call them spiritual lessons that I learned in Honduras. So I'm just going to share those with you. And then I don't know if I'll be able to, I don't know. Do you have a way that I can see it on the back or not? On my phone? Okay. I'll try to share a few slides too. I've never done this before, so you guys are my guinea pigs today. Hopefully it works out. But some things I'd like to share with you about what I learned in Honduras is, in working with the medical team. Last year, there was about 20 of us. This year, there was about 35 people that went, which is huge when you think about it. People from all over the country and different walks of life and ages, and it was quite the group. But I found out that God uses everyone. You know, God doesn't just use people just like me, or God doesn't just use people just like you. He uses every person. And that whole thought about we're the body of Christ, and some are the arms and some are the mouth and the ears, it's so true on a missions trip. Another thing I found out, that material blessings don't guarantee inner peace. You go down there and basically you leave most of your comforts behind, and you go spend a week with people that really their main goal for the day is to figure out what they're going to eat, you know, I mean, day to day, where they're going to get their water. I mean, it kind of takes all the pressure about how stylish your clothes are, or if you have the latest and greatest gadget, that kind of all goes away. And what was fascinating is that in spite of being so poor, they're happy people. They're cheerful people, and they love to have a good time. Another thing I discovered is that when you give to others, you find yourself on the receiving end. You give away, you think you're giving away your time and your money and your efforts, and the way they respond, it just blesses you. One thing that was pretty special, and it kind of goes along with my next thought, is that you don't have to know the language to feel God's presence and His Spirit. After many of our days where we'd go out into a mission or a village where there was a local church, the pastor of that local church, after doing our medical stuff, he would want to pray a blessing over the team. And of course, I don't speak any Spanish and understand very little. And yet, when he would start praying, I mean, all of us would just be weeping because we felt God's presence there, and how he was so grateful for everything that had been done that day. Another thing I learned, that medicine is actually an avenue for evangelism. Who knew that giving out medicine is a way to help someone come to know the Lord? But we got to see that firsthand. These people are needy, and they come and they get their free medicine and get a medical exam, but in the process, they also get to hear the gospel preached to them before they come into the clinic, and then the providers would pray for them, and some of them even led people to the Lord during their physical exam time, so it's pretty special. I'm going to share one little story. I call this, miracles sometimes look like a bottle of calamine lotion. We take suitcases full of medicine, okay, and just random things. I mean, lots of ibuprofen and that kind of stuff. But every now and then, something comes in the suitcase, and you're like, what are we going to do with this? What's the purpose? And it's kind of interesting because one day we were doing the clinic, and I and another guy, Chuck Dodd, you guys know him, we were in charge of the pharmacy, and so we handled all the medicines that came in and out, and we're sitting there, and kind of it was a downtime, and all of a sudden I look over out the window out in the front yard, and we were having our clinic in a school, so lots of kids were around, and I see this little boy over there, and all of a sudden he's just flailing, and his friend comes over and jerks his shirt off, and I see just a swarm of bees around him, and they fought him off, but then he's just standing over against the tree, just crying and crying. He's probably 6 years old, maybe. It was so sad. So somebody ran out and got him and brought him in, and he had, was it about 40 bites on him? 40 sting bites, and he was just so sad, and it was just interesting because that very morning, one of the people helping us load up the medicines said, I saw this bottle of calamine lotion. I thought, we don't usually hand that out in just a medical clinic. He said, but I threw it in the suitcase, and sure enough, that was the day we needed calamine lotion, and we were able to treat the little boy and give him Benadryl and all the things he needed, plus cover him with calamine lotion. It was just kind of a cool moment that God knew what we were going to need that day, and you just have no way of knowing what you're going to need, and God knew, and he provided. And then my last thing is that love is a universal language. I can't speak Spanish, but I can speak smiles, and I can speak hugs, and they do the same. They couldn't speak English, but their smiles and their eyes communicated so much, and I'm just very grateful that I was allowed to go. So I'm going to try to, I have it on my phone. Will it mess you up, or do you have it there? Okay. So my parents were actually missionaries when I was a kid for a few years, and I've been on a lot of mission fields, and I've sat in a lot of mission services and been through a lot of missionary slideshows, so I'm not going to do those kind of, the boring missionary slideshows. I'm just going to share a few pictures just to give you a glimpse, and they're not even that exciting, but just special things that I enjoyed. The scenery. I mean, this was just driving home from one of our clinics. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this. Okay. How do I get it to switch?
Just tap on the next, on the bottom will be the next one to go.
Is it moving? You guys tell me, because I can't see what. Tech support, please. Well, you know what? I could just stand down here. I'll talk loud, and I'll let you do the.
She can talk loud when she wants to.
Especially when I'm talking to certain people. So this was just driving home from one of our days out. It was just like a puzzle picture, you know. Every day we got to see scenery that was phenomenal. Okay, you can go to the next one. This is how it looked every day out in front of usually we had our clinic in a school. They would shut the school down, and then everyone would line up, and they would have to come past some Spanish-speaking nurses that would do the triage and kind of give everyone a ticket to find out exactly what they were there for that day. Next. This is Dave and Melody Sankey. She's his interpreter. She's interpreted for him quite a few years, and they would set up these tables, and every patient would just come through and see. And we had about 9 providers this year kind of set up in that same style. Just kids. You can just keep scrolling. That's fine. I think my next pictures are just the precious faces of Honduras. And then some older faces. A lot of the older men over there. In fact, most of the older men wear cowboy hats, so that's always a fun thing. Every village that we go to, Dave donates a soccer ball to the school teacher to be used for the school. A lot of these villages don't have access to new soccer balls, so it's always a highlight when he comes and brings them a soccer ball. This was on a Sunday night. We were able to go out to one of the local village churches and worship with them, and Melody Sankey was up. Since she was a missionary in Mexico, she's very fluent in Spanish, and she was sharing with them. This was some of the fun moments. Caleb got to play a little Spanish guitar with them. We had a great night. Randy Dunn, who's from Columbus, Indiana. I don't know if any of you guys know him, but he came along this time, and he brought tons of candy. We called him the Candy Man because the kids would just circle around him every time. That was Emily, our daughter, and her Honduran friend. They handed out vitamins to every person that came through. This is just some fun pictures. Dave will probably share with you the story of this little boy, Ricardo, but he was blind when Dave first met him, and through a series of miracles, God has worked it out for him to have surgeries, and he now can see, and he's a special boy. It was my first time to ever meet him, so it was very special for me too. There were two men on the trip from Pennsylvania who own a pizza shop. They are Guatemalan, but they were born in, I think they might have been born here in America, but they run an Italian pizza shop. So it's really an interesting dynamic. But they made pizza for all the team Sunday night, and I'm telling you what, it was incredible. So I had to get a picture of that. This is Marvin. He is a Honduran man that works for the Red Cross, and he helps run a lot of the transportation for our team. And I say clown because he actually has a side job as a clown, and he's the most fun, probably one of the most important men on our team, because he knows the people, he knows the language, he can sense every situation if it's going to be, maybe a risky situation, or he just knows how to handle the crowds, and he's a great guy to have along. And then I had to share my calamine pictures, so that's the beehive up above, just kind of give you an idea. I have to tell you the truth about that beehive story. The boys were throwing rocks at the beehive, so there was that too. This is a picture of our team outside our last clinic day. And then I think my last picture is just scenery again. But thank you guys for letting us come and share something that's become actually very special to my heart as well as to Dave.
Okay. Well, thank you, Heidi. It is always much better when your wife is along. And we certainly had a great time. Across the years, one of the blessings is that I've been able to take all of my children with me down there. We have 5 children. And so year by year, they've been able to go with us, and we've certainly enjoyed that. So let me just backtrack a little bit and fill in a few more details. We fly into San Pedro Sula, Honduras, and so we left Indianapolis, and it was, I don't know, cold, I know that. 25-ish, something like that, and you fly into Central America, and it's, I don't know, 90-ish, whatever, when you land, and it feels really, really good. The only catch is that a few years ago, U.S. News and World Report came out with an article about a week or so before I was flying down there, and Heidi said, Dave, you realize that San Pedro Sula is the murder capital of the world. And that was true at that time. I think they've fallen to maybe 5 now. But that's where we land. And then Daniel, the caravan of people, if you can imagine how much effort it takes to haul that many people, about 3 hours up into the mountains where EFM has a compound in this little village called San Luis. And across the years, they developed actually a little runway there. When the president of Honduras needs to go visit that area, guess where he lands? Right on their runway, because that's the only runway. And so Daniel Melton has met the 2 past presidents of the country of Honduras. On that compound, they also have a Bible college, and they have an AM and FM radio station that reaches out across those mountains with the gospel. And they also have a little medical clinic there that has been there, I believe, since the 1970s. And it functions mainly as a maternity clinic. Things are a little different there. There's no prenatal care. And so when it's your time to have your baby, they haul you most likely in the back of a pickup, an hour or so across the jungle. They drop you off and you have your baby. And so that's what they mainly do there. But it's also a 24/7 emergency room. And it's the only clinic within hours of that vicinity. And so we have seen all kinds of things that come through that clinic. But it is staffed by Honduran nurses, and so they really don't need us there so much. What we do is actually go into very remote villages that have no access to any medical care whatsoever. As a matter of fact, one of the villages that we went to this year still had no electricity in the village. And so they live very, very primitive lives. Most of them live in little dirt adobe houses or perhaps even a little wood house. And that's just the way they are. And so if you can imagine having absolutely no access to any medical care at all, when we show up, they are very, very appreciative. And so that's kind of what we do. We hit 4 different villages this year and had a great time, and just anticipate many more days in the future. So I feel like I've been to church already. Thank you for blessing my heart through your singing, your testimonies, and the special and all that. And so I'm really not a preacher. So I just want to share a few things with you today that I shared with the group down there. And it's also a message for me, and I hope it's maybe an admonition for you all. Now, I know Brother Scott very well, and I know what a heart he has for God and for those lost souls around. And so I don't know that I'm going to tell you anything that you haven't heard already, but maybe it's just a fresh look and just some things and thoughts that I want to share with you. Do you have Mark in this Bible, brother? I'm going to read to you a little bit out of the book of Mark, chapter 6. And you're welcome to turn, but you don't have to. It's always risky to read out someone else's Bible, but Mark chapter 6 and verse 32 through 44. And they departed into a desert place by ship privately, Jesus and the disciples, that is. And the people saw them departing, and many knew him, and so they ran afoot thither out of all the cities, and outwent them or outran them, and they came together unto him. And Jesus, when he came out, saw much people and was moved with compassion toward them, because they were as sheep, having no shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. And when the day was now far spent, he taught them all day. His disciples came unto him and said, "This is a desert place. There's no McDonald's here. And now the time is far past. Send them away, Jesus, that they may go into the country round about and into the villages and buy themselves bread." That's the disciples' point of view. Send them away, Jesus, so they can go feed themselves, for they have nothing to eat. And Jesus answered and said to them, "No, give ye them to eat." And they say unto him, "Shall we go and buy 200 pennyworth of bread and give them to eat?" Again, this is the disciples. You want us to use our money to go buy them something to eat, Jesus? He said unto them, "How many loaves have ye? Go and see." And so they went around, and when they knew, they said unto him, "Well, we came up with 5 loaves and 2 fish." Remember, there's like 5,000 men out there, right? Plus women and children. And Jesus commanded all the people to make them all sit down by companies upon the green grass. And they sat down in ranks by hundreds and by 50s. And when he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, he looked up to heaven, and he blessed, and he started breaking the loaves, and he gave them to his disciples to set before the people. And the two fishes he divided among them all, 2 fish all. And they did all eat, and they were all filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of fragments of the fishes. And they that did eat of the loaves were about 5,000 people. I want to talk to you this morning about Jesus' commandment. Give ye them to eat. You know, we talk about the Great Commission, and the Great Commission is for us to go into all the world and preach the gospel and make disciples. But you know, sometimes the gospel, as Jesus taught it, is both physical and spiritual. It's great that we have church here this morning and we feed ourselves spiritually, but sometimes there's other needs in our lives that are physical. Sometimes the gospel is given both by the touch of divinity, the touch of God, and the touch of humanity, my hands and your hands. That's the gospel. We cannot completely feed people spiritually sometimes while ignoring them physically, and vice versa. Think of the times that Jesus spoke or he demonstrated giving people food and giving them drink. His first miracle was what? The marriage of Cana. He turned the water into wine, and the people were nourished. Think about the different passages in the Bible, not just this one, about Jesus feeding the multitudes. Think about Matthew 10, verse 42. Jesus said, a cup of cold water given in his name. The importance of just a cup of cold water. Think about Matthew 25, verse 35, when Jesus said, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. That's what I'm talking about today. Sometimes it's a spiritual thing combined with a physical thing. I just read in my devotions recently about Acts, and after his resurrection, he met the disciples. They were fishing, and they had kind of given up on this whole Jesus and king and all that, and he got crucified, and so they went back to fishing, and they came back to shore, and there was Jesus cooking fish and bread for them. I want to talk to you about three things this morning. What do we feed them? And, where is it? How do we feed them? And how much do we feed them? First point, what do we feed them? Well, we're there to really feed them the gospel. Spreading the gospel is really our primary goal. As Heidi said, amazingly, through the means of medicine, we can touch their lives. I've told people it's just a phenomenal thing. You know, this is no reflection on missionaries, but literally to go into a remote jungle village of Honduras as a white person, it would take you years and years of labor to win their confidence and tell them the gospel and bring them into the kingdom. Literally in 15 minutes, we roll up in four-wheel drive vehicles. We're unloading totes and suitcases full of stuff. Honduran evangelist is setting up church over here, and they sit down and they have to go through their church service before they can get into our line. And he preaches them the gospel. And by the time they come around to us, if the opportunity arises, we pray with them, and people have been saved right then and there. I'm really high tech, so I want to play something to you off my phone, okay? Sorry, I hope this works.
She just wasn't very healthy, and she had several problems. So got to talking to her, and she had seen a doctor before, and they told her that she had a mass in one lung and that she needed to have surgery. obviously she didn't have money for surgery or anything. Anyway, she had a lot of problems, so I'm working through each problem through the interpreter, and I saw a tear, and then another tear. And I thought, well, I'm going to talk to her about spiritual things here in a minute. You know, she had just come through a service learning how to get saved. And Gabby, she was so good. She saw also, and she just switched it. And I realized that she was talking to her about spiritual things, so I just sat there and waited. She talked to her for a little while. And the lady, she just leaned forward. She was just taking in every word that Gabby was saying. So then Gabby tells me she wants to pray. She wants to get saved. We prayed with her right there at our table. And she prayed. She didn't hesitate. It was just like she was drinking it in. And she got saved there at our table. After that, of course, I said the whole trip's worth it right there.
Let me cut it off there. Diana White is from Shoals, Indiana. If you've ever been to Shoals, you've been lost. Diana is a nurse, and she works at our hospital. And this year, she wanted to go on our trip with us. And that was her story, her very first patient that came to her, and the lady gave her heart to the Lord. That's why we're there, to spread the gospel. Only eternity will reveal the souls that are saved by things that we think may be insignificant. In our everyday lives, we may touch people that would not have ever been touched otherwise, and that's why we're there. The scripture says that Jesus looked on them with compassion. The question is, how should we look on people? Down there, I think Heidi showed you the picture. Man, there's just hundreds of people. One day we saw 437 in one little village, and they're just all lined up, and you just see those people. And how do we look on those people? How do you look on the people? At Walmart or your workplace or whatever, how do we look on them? Jesus looked on them as sheep having no shepherd, not in a condescending way, but with compassion and love. Truly, sometimes when we go to these villages, they're steeped in heathenism and darkness, and we show up, and we're white people, and we're representing Jesus. And I tell the team so often, be aware of how you interact. Be aware of how you present yourself. Because to those people, you are Jesus. My point is, what do we feed them? We feed them the gospel. You know, caring for their physical needs is our vehicle of spreading the gospel. Realize not everybody can do that. Not everybody has the opportunity. But what a blessing it is for us. You know, if you think about it, it's kind of a modern day miracle. We read in the Bible, the multitudes gathered together. There's quite a few of here this morning, but there's probably a little room for a few more, Scott. They don't just flock in here. This is a lot of work, I realize. But it's a modern day miracle. People come out of those jungles. Sometimes mothers have told us they will hike 2 to 3 hours with several children in tow just to get to our clinic. It's a modern day miracle seeing the multitudes gathering. So, how do we feed them? That's another big question. What do we feed them? We feed them the gospel, but how do we feed them? Heidi's mentioned it already. We're each given different talents and gifts that God has given us. And He expects you and I to return those gifts and talents for His glory. Obviously, down there, we're there to spread the gospel by the means of medicine, but we all have opportunities every single day to do that. We all have gifts and talents that God has given us, and He expects us to use those for His glory. With us on the team, and Heidi could have shown hundreds of pictures. If you get on Facebook, they're all over. man named Tony from South Carolina is a optometry technician, and Tony's been going with us 3 or 4 years, something like that. Tony has a real passion for this, and so every year we bring suitcases of used glasses and new reading glasses, and this year he brought 1,000 sunglasses. And so people that need help with that, they get in a separate line and they go see Tony, and Tony preaches to them. And Tony also gives them often glasses so that they're able to see. And guess what they do? They hand them the Bible and they're able to read. People that have literally not been able to see or read for years can suddenly read the Bible. Can you imagine the smiles and just how their faces light up when they can see the Bible and start reading again? I told Tony, feed the people with your gift. Heidi showed you the picture of little Ricardo. One of the first years that I was there, remote village again, just so far out, no electricity, and we give everybody toothbrushes, okay? It's part of our gig. And this little guy comes up to me, and he has a little toothbrush, and over the top of it's one of those plastic protectors. And he's holding it about this close, and he's jabbering at me, and I have no idea what he's saying. And so finally someone says, well, he can't figure it out. He can't see it well enough. And I looked at his eyes and realized that he was born with congenital cataracts. Now, some of you have had cataracts and you know what that's about, but he was born with such severe cataracts that he had essentially no vision. Another lady in the team later came to me and she said, Dr. Boardman, she said, did you see a little boy that was blind today? I'm like, yeah. She said, boy, you think we could get him some help? I'm like, I don't know. I talked to Daniel, the missionary, and Dr. Don Smith that was with us. I said, hey, you know, if I could get that kid back to Cape Jordan, Missouri, where I live, I know some eye doctors. We could fix him up. They're like, no way. You don't understand how hard it would be to get him and his family to the United States, get surgery, da-da-da-da. Long story short, before I left that year, I had a medical student with me. I was teaching, and I said, hey, the last week of the month, I'm going to Honduras. You're going to have to find someone else. He says, hey, that's cool. My dad goes to Honduras. My dad's an eye surgeon. So Daniel takes this little boy out of the jungle, gets him to this clinic where American eye surgeons came. They took little Ricardo's lenses out of his eyes. He was 5 years old. They said, we can't put his lenses back in because he's too young, he's still growing, but he can see better without his lenses than he can see with his lenses. He's 5. At 10 years old, Daniel takes him back, and they put lenses back in his eyes and give him glasses. And we just got to see him the other week. Little Ricardo, I mean, he is just full of energy and life. And he can see. One time Daniel gave him a New Testament, and little Ricardo says, yeah, he says, when I grow up, I'm going to be a preacher. Now, Ricardo was a work in progress, but I just feel like God has a special plan for Ricardo, for us to show up in his village and so many dots be connected, and little Ricardo can see today. Our translators also feed the people. I don't speak much Spanish. I can say breathe deeply as I'm listening to their lungs. They have no idea what breathe deeply is. But if my translator says respiro profundas, they kind of understand that. I tell the translators, you are God's voice. Feed the people. The young people, Caleb and our other kids, interacted with the Honduran children so well and made friends and gave them balloons and blew bubbles and gave them candy and kicked the soccer balls and hugged on them and loved on them and carried them around. We go, Caleb, you know, and he's Honduran people are like this tall, you know, I mean, they think he's Michael Jordan or somebody, you know, like. They fed the young people 100 evangelists that went with us preached the gospel and gave the people to taste of the everlasting water so that they will never thirst again. My brother Steve is an orthopedic surgeon. He goes with us, and he doesn't like to look in ears and listen to hearts. He likes to cut on people. And so we left him home a couple days, and we didn't need him. But he got to cut on some people. This year he did a carpal tunnel surgery and a trigger finger release, and he cut a big old egg-shaped foreign body out of a guy's knee and cut some other things off of people. Steve fed the people with a knife. Our other providers, the nurses, we gave out medicine to heal their diseases. They fed the people. Our one buddy, Keith Shaper, that maybe some of you know his name, missionary, he's our doorkeeper. He does a good job about crowd control. You need a good guy like that. I told Keith, I said, guard that door with a very soft heart, but a very hard foot on the dogs that try to come into our clinic. But Keith fed the people. Heidi was our lunch lady. I said, Heidi, feed the people. The point is that we all have different talents. Brother Scott, this is your people. Feed the people. Carmelita, I lost her, I don't know. Here she is. These are your ladies, Carmelita. Feed them. Sunday school teachers, feed them. Nathaniel got off on women's hairdos this morning. I don't know. Our doorkeeper guy this morning, feed the people. You ladies clean the church. It's not much glamour in that, but you feed the people. How do we feed the people? You feed the people with your hands. Because remember, you are Jesus to them. My third point. Man, I'm long-winded. I'm sorry, Scott. How much do we feed them? Well, how much did Jesus feed them? The Bible says that they all ate and they were all filled. Verse 42. So how much do we feed the people this morning? Well, I guess kind of the question is, how much of Jesus am I bringing to feed them? Am I bringing them just enough Jesus to get kind of by in life? Or is there plenty of Jesus with me to go around? The other question that I'll ask you this morning, and I ask myself, how can I feed them unless I have something to feed them? You know, the disciples came kind of unprepared that day. I don't know what the circumstances were. Maybe the crowd just showed up and Jesus preached, and then they're like, hey, what's for lunch? And sometimes that's life. I understand that. But there was no preparation. The disciples came empty-handed that day. Trust God that will keep us from being empty-handed, but that's another. But those disciples did come empty. But you know what? God blessed them, and he used them, and they fulfilled the will of God, and they fed the people. And what happened? They had 12 baskets left over. 12 disciples, 12 baskets. Amazing coincidence. Probably another sermon there, Brother Scott. The point is, if we simply are willing to be God's vessels in God's hands, we can feed the people, and we'll go away with our basket full, with our hearts full of God's blessings. I'm going to close there. And Jesus was moved with compassion. He looked on the people as sheep having no shepherd. And then he said unto his disciples, give ye them to eat.